Awesome. Well, welcome to today's presentation on From Impulse to Intention, Making Healthier Choices in Recovery. My name is Shivani, and I'm one of the managers of mission initiatives here at the National Eating Disorders Association. I'm super excited to welcome you all here today. And before we get started, I'd like to talk a little bit more about NEDA and the work that we do. So, NEDA is a nonprofit organization working to fundamentally change the way eating disorders are understood and treated, and to empower those affected to achieve lasting well-being and recovery. Through campaigns like Eating Disorders Awareness Week and through our Campus Warriors program and NEDA Care events, we are working to increase public understanding of these complex disorders. We also provide information and resources through the Grace Hall and Cozine Resource Center, as well as through our educational programs like the Understanding Eating Disorders presentation and webinars like this. Additionally, we promote early intervention through our screening tool, which has helped over 1 million people. And we have also invested in groundbreaking research that helps to develop effective treatments. If you would like to support our work and more programming like this webinar, we appreciate any donations, and I'll include a link in the chat later on. Now, I would love to introduce our presenter, Pamela Madsen, the founder and clinical director of Sea Change Psychotherapy LLC in Atlanta, Georgia. Pamela specializes in treating couples and adult individuals with eating disorders, substance use, and anxiety disorders at the intersection of developmental trauma. Pamela has worked at all levels of care and is president-elect for the Atlanta chapter of the International Association of Eating Disorder Professionals. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to use the chat, and I will relay them to Pamela later on at the end during a period of questions and answers. So I will pass it on over to Pamela. Please feel free to take it away, and thank you so much for sharing this important information with our community.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm going to share my screen here. Great, are you all able to see that? Shivani, are you able to see?
We can see
Okay,
it.
great. Wonderful. Okay. Thank you so much for that warm welcome and introduction, Shivani. I'm Pamela Madsen, and my workshop today is From Impulse to Intention, Making Healthier Choices in Recovery. We're going to explore how trauma impacts decision making and why impulsivity can feel easier in the moment, and how we can begin shifting toward more flexible, intentional choices. You might benefit from having some paper and a pen nearby, as we're going to be doing some activities or exercises to support your wellness tonight. If you'd like to learn more about me or my practice, I've included a QR code here so you can reach my practice if you'd like to. I do present a lot of workshops and things, and some resources are made public, and I have a little series with WebMD that I do too on chronic illness and mental health. So you can find links to that at my website. And so I want to start by grounding us in a few intentions. This is a safe and supportive space, and please take care of yourself however you need to. If tonight you need to step out or stretch, or breathe deeply if you feel overwhelmed, be sure to take the time to do that for yourself. And our focus today is kind of threefold. We're going to be understanding how trauma shapes decision making and looking at the overlap between eating disorders and substance use, and practicing some practical tools for healthier trauma sensitive choices. So when we talk about trauma, it's not just about like what has happened, it's about how our body and mind respond to it. Trauma is often described as like something coming on too much, like it's too big for us, coming on too fast, like it's unexpected and or too soon. So that might be developmentally, that might be in age, it might be in the maturity of a relationship. It overwhelms our nervous system, whether it's a single event or a repeated experience, or even like a chronic adversity. It can also be considered as anything less than nurturing. The result is often like hypervigilance, reactivity, or avoidance. And all of those are survival strategies that can later show up as an eating disorder or substance use behaviors. So let's take a minute to reflect, silently to ourselves on a time something felt overwhelming for you, even if it seems small, like in hindsight now, just to bring this process to mind. Okay. Now let's look at how trauma connects to both eating disorders and substance use. And the pathways are often kind of the same. You'll see emotional numbing, avoidance, and difficulty regulating feelings. Like, for example, someone might restrict food to feel in control, and then use substances to numb those emotions. Another person might binge eat after a trigger and then drink to quiet the shame that follows after that. So these behaviors, they start as survival strategies, just to help us cope. They helped us for a little while, even to get through some maybe times where we didn't feel like we had any other options. But over time, they become like a cycle that keeps people really stuck. And sounds like a lot of you might be ready to break free of that cycle. So I think this is often really helpful to understand is the impact of trauma on the brain, and kind of why we get stuck in this kind of the same loop. So there's three parts of the brain that participate in trauma. One is the prefrontal cortex, where and that is like here in the front of the brain. That's where we make our decisions. We would be able to do like complex thinking, um, and abstract thinking. Then we have the hippocampus, which is kind of in the middle. And the hippocampus, it actually helps us discern whether or not something is past or present. Um, and then the amygdala, which is the alarm center for the brain, it becomes overactive in when something is traumatic. So when we do experience something traumatic, we get stuck in the amygdala response, which means we can't really access that prefrontal cortex. We're going to have difficulty with planning. Our thoughts may be considered irrational, and they kind of go, that prefrontal cortex is going to go offline under stress. And in the hippocampus, that helps us process the memories that gets disrupted. So when we're reminded of a trauma, we might have a difficult time discerning whether or not it's happening currently or it happened in the past. It'll actually kind of feel emotionally like it's happening all over again. And this is why pausing can feel unsafe. Your brain is wired to act quickly, not to reflect when it's going to perceive danger. We don't have access to that prefrontal cortex. I always tell my clients, in a when you're held up in a bank in a hostage situation, um, which I actually have been in before, you can't really sit down and do like complex calculus math or even really think very creatively. Only like a real small percentage of people can maintain presence in that moment. And I think we saw someone mention in the chat. Yes, Brenda, that seemed to resonate with you. Okay, great. And so then we think about impulse versus intentions, and we're going to think about it through a trauma lens. And they're all survival based. We're talking about that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Fawn, I think, is maybe we use that as another F word in the series of four, but I think what might help that resonate a little bit more is appease. And so some of us have like a trauma response where we try to appease and gain favor with or calm maybe a threatening person around us. Intentional decisions, on the other hand, are values based and they come from a more regulated state. We're not really able to assess our values and be intentional in our decision making when we're feeling impulsive. We're kind of really focused on that moment of like, save our life. And recovery is about learning how to insert this pause right between the urge and then the action that we take by decision. And so that we can move from that impulse to intention. And so maybe you guys want to drop in the chat if you feel comfortable sharing, like, what does impulse look like for you? And then what does intention look like for you? And Shivani, if you get anybody feeling courageous enough to share.
Someone said that impulse feels out of your control.
Mhm.
Impulse feels erratic and intention feels more purposeful.
Mm, really good. Yeah, oftentimes with impulse, I don't know about you guys, but I think about like when times I feel unsafe is when I'm driving through traffic in Atlanta, where I live, and there's an awful lot of it. And when I feel like when someone swerves, my impulse is like to mine is to freeze. And so sometimes that might be like just gripping the steering wheel really fast and like almost like zoom out. Some people might yell. I've been in the car with someone who gets maybe counter aggressive and when they're driving, and that's their fight response. And tension in that moment might look like taking a second to do some deep breathing. And I usually get to this point fairly quickly now, slowing down and moving away from them in traffic if I notice somebody's driving unsafe.
We have someone that gave an actual example as well. Someone said that impulse for them is when they eat an entire box of cookies, and then intention is when they make up the bed.
Oh, I love that. Yes. That was an an excellent example. Intentionally making your bed. Ooh, next level. Okay. You guys give some any more thought to that. We'll read them. Okay. So why impulsivity feels easier in the moment. So here's the catch. Impulsivity, it often feels easier because it bypasses anxiety. If we act quickly, that means you don't sit in the tension of a values conflict. It's like if you wanted to binge, but also wanting recovery. That anxiety is this mixed feeling and this ambivalence about wanting both at the same time, needing that immediate relief from distress. The anxiety is so uncomfortable, that impulse is so uncomfortable. We need to make it stop as quickly as possible. For trauma survivors, though, impulsivity can provide temporary relief from distressing emotions, but that relief is really short lived and is often followed by guilt or shame. And so, also tonight, I really want to normalize that everyone experiences these same feelings. Everyone really has that urge to provide temporary relief when something is uncomfortable. Like our body is wired for it. Our nervous system and our peripheral nervous system is definitely wired to avoid pain. Um, just like if you were to touch a hot stove or a hot pan, you wouldn't just like lean into it and leave it there. Your body pulls you away from it. Just the same way that shame is painful to us, we'll do what we have to do to quickly move away from shame. But with intentionally calming our nervous system, we can instead then make some intentional decisions on how we want to handle difficult moments and move to like a calm state. All right. So we have values in our recovery, and our values conflict happens when we want from what we want in that moment when it clashes with what matters most in the long term to us. And so, for example, reaching for a substance when we feel stressed, that conflicts with like the value of safety or health. Um, or even like with the longevity of a relationship that we've been wanting to keep, that we've been struggling that relationship had been struggling because of our substance use. Our brain wants to resolve that tension quickly, and so that's why that impulsivity is tempting. The practice is learning to notice the conflict and then to tolerate it long enough to choose differently. And so I'd like to invite you guys, if you want to journal it on your paper there with you on your own, or if you feel comfortable putting it in the chat, like what values feel most important to you in your recovery from eating disorders or substance use or both? I would love some courageous shares in the chat on that.
Honesty and authenticity.
Mm, really good. Yes, our nervous system is actually at our calmest when we feel safe enough to be authentic. All right, great. So we're going to talk about slowing down without the overwhelm. That pause, it can feel unbearable at first. If we've not had practice with our like maintaining a window of tolerance, expanding that window of tolerance for the discomfort is what helps build that in that intentionality. Um, so some tools we're going to talk about today, we're going to be talking about grounding into the body, reminding yourself of your values and practicing compassionate self-talk. And just remember, discomfort is survivable and it's the bridge to change. So we're going to practice a short pause together. This is a way to notice what's happening inside and without immediately reacting. Remember, you're in charge of your body. And if at any point this feels uncomfortable, you can simply open your eyes, look around the room, or take a sip of water. So I want you to sit comfortably. If you can, place your feet on the ground flat and let your hands rest on your lap. And if you feel comfortable enough in the space where you are, go ahead and close your eyes. And take one slow, gentle breath in. And let it out at your own pace. Now take another. Take a deep breath in and let it go. And as you breathe, simply notice what's present for you right now. And that might be a body sensation, a thought, or an emotion. And just notice it. You're going to be curious about it. I'm not going to approach it with judgment, just curiosity. There's no need to change it. Now, if your mind wanders, gently bring your attention back to your breath. Or to that feeling of your feet on the floor, your breath and your feeling of your feet on the ground. Those are your anchors. Now let's take one more slow breath together. You breathe in and exhale. It might help you to think, I always think about smelling the coffee and then blowing out the candle on a cupcake. When you're ready, Open your eyes or lift your gaze back and notice if anything feels slightly different after that short pause. Go ahead and share in the chat what you noticed.
Someone said that they always feel better doing things like this.
Mhm. Yes. Especially this time of fall, I love to think about like smelling like a pumpkin or some kind of like seasonal drink. You smell the cinnamon.
The apples.
Yes. Um, and
So someone
I
said that they feel more aware and relaxed.
good. I'm glad. Yeah. One of the things that I think a lot of times in our life, things can feel like all out of control. And we often forget the one thing we can control is our breath. We can control our breathing. So when everything feels like we're losing control, just take a few minutes and focus on your breath and your feet on the ground.
The last couple of thoughts were someone said that what was heavy on their mind at the start is now less intense for them.
Oh,
Someone
it
actually
would-
said that it was actually a little harder than they thought it would be. Focusing
mm,
on their breath helped to stay more focused here.
yes. I love hearing that it was a relief for someone out there. So, in my work as a therapist, my heart just dances when I see someone move from like fear to safety or anxiety to calm. Um, it's like a thrill I can't even describe, like being able to watch that kind of pain relief happen like live in the moment. Okay, so let's talk about nervous system regulation. This is our first step. We can't make intentional choices if we're dysregulated. So before deciding we want to focus on regulation and try a sensory check, or use a weighted grounding blanket, even like weighted blankets are excellent for that. Orienting to your environment with your eyes. You take that slow breathing, paced breathing. We want to focus on regulation first and then decision. And another skill that can be so helpful I'm when I'm having a tough moment or working with someone who's feeling like high levels of distress and feeling impulsive, I'll teach them a skill called 5 4 3 2 1 grounding skill. And so what we would do is engage the five senses here. And so take a look around the room where you are and pick out five things that you can see. And ordinarily, I would ask you to do it if you were in my office, or I was sitting with you as a friend. I'd have you describe the items to me. But for tonight, so for time's sake tonight, I'm going to have you just like notice five items in your room where you are. And now I want you to look to notice four things that you can feel. So that might be I can feel my feet on the floor. I can feel the air in my lungs. I can feel this chair I'm sitting in. I can feel the temperature of the air. And then notice three things that you can hear. Right now, I have a few cats sleeping near me, and they are like one of them's kind of snoring, like snore purring. I can hear the air conditioning in my house, even though I'm cold. I live with someone who's always hot. And I can hear some birds chirping right outside my window here. And then two things that you can either smell or taste. These might be sometimes hard to come up with in the moment because we might not have access to something we can taste, but and smell or taste. And then for the one, share one good thing, say one good thing about yourself. And if you feel comfortable putting that one thing in the chat, go ahead. Surprisingly, this is the hardest part of the skill. You can do these in any order that you want to, as long as you're engaging the five senses. So you don't have to remember any order in particular. I just find starting with sight and touch to be usually the easiest because there's more of those available. Somebody share in the chat.
Someone said, I am resilient.
Yes, you are. If you've made it this far, you definitely are. So when we're struggling, we're going to use those resiliency skills to adapt better into more lifelong sustaining skills.
Great day at Pride Fest as an ally yesterday.
Yes,
Lovely.
love that. Always feels so good to stand up for what's right. Excellent. Okay. So we're going to talk some about some common triggers here in eating disorder or substance use recovery. Some of those common triggers include feeling powerless, being criticized, being in conflict, sensory cues. So we might have like a physical sensation or sound or taste or touch that can bring us back to that trauma moment or trauma anniversaries. Um, so, and this kind of goes back to that amygdala where I said, the amygdala is where the trauma initiates and puts us in fight or flight, but the hippocampus helps us discern from past to present. And when we're triggered, it will take us back to the same time back when it originally happened, as if we're almost there. We can even feel the same feeling. Sometimes you'll smell the same sounds, which is why understanding that anatomy is so important. Like you can even ground ourselves and say, okay, like I'm re-experiencing it, and that's what my brain is supposed to do when I feel threat. So I want you guys, if you can, take a moment and write down 3 triggers that apply to you. If you'd like, you can share it in the chat, or you can share it later with a partner, supportive person. Sharing can normalize these experiences and help us feel less alone. I've already shared one of my personal triggers is someone driving unsafely or swerving near me in the car. Another one is public speaking. So I'm doing a little exposure therapy tonight with you all.
The anniversary of their brother's death. We know the grief can be really tough. Asking to be weighed, which I'm sure a lot of people experience when they go to the doctor's office. I get triggered when I'm contacted by someone who is an authority over me.
That really takes you maybe to feeling powerless or criticism, potential for criticism. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. I know that actually takes a lot of courage to be so public with the things that frighten us so madly. So we're going to talk now about some practical trauma-sensitive decision-making skills. So here's some tools, and you can use any of them, all of them. My hope is that one of these feels like they really resonate for you personally, or you feel like, oh yeah, I can connect to that and do that here. So we've identified how trauma impacts the decision making, and then we're gonna use these to just move from that impulse to intention. And the first tool is called STOP, and it stands for stop, take a breath, observe, and proceed. So when you notice an urge is rising, whether to binge or use alcohol or another substance, or even withdraw socially from like your supports, this is a way of creating just enough space without a space between the trigger and the action. So I want you to imagine something stressful, and maybe not like a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most like distressing that you can imagine. Today, like, so we can stay grounded, maybe something right around the 5, 6 zone. And then now, one might be like if you were at Starbucks and they got your order wrong and you'd already repeated it a few times, that can be frustrating, even if you kind of driven off already from the drive-through and realized it. Now, let's practice that stop. Take one slow breath. Notice your body and your surroundings. Observe. Imagine choosing one small step forward. Think about what values you want to represent from yourself in that moment and proceed. How did it feel to pause before acting? Now I'm going to share one called Name It to Tame It. I've got a little gator there. I feel like gators are kind of wild. Um, when we put words to our feelings, like saying, I feel anxious or I feel powerless, the brain actually calms down. It feels validated. And naming an emotion lowers the amygdala reactivity and allows the prefrontal cortex to come back online. So that's really where we're trying to head back toward to, is that the place in the front of the brain where we can make active decisions and discernment. So next time you feel an urge, pause and simply say, this is anxiety or this is shame. That simple act can give you a bit of space that can create just enough for you to decide on an intention. So take 10 seconds and silently name what you're feeling right now. And if you notice that it changes anything in your body, say so in the chat. Now, the third tool I'm going to share with you guys is called Values Anchor. And this means identifying a few values that matter most to you. Like we think about like our health, connections, relationships, honesty, or freedom. And when you feel an urge, ask yourself, does this action move me forward toward or away from my values? That simple check-in can help bring us some long-term perspective into the moment. I think we had someone share in the chat. Let me see.
Yes. So someone said that they feel tension when someone is yelling. Their breathing gets fast.
Yeah, and that moves you, it seems like that moves you away from your values by yelling. Yeah.
Can you give an example of the values anchor?
Yeah. So, my goodness, a lot of these come up in relationship, right? So, we want to think about like if I have like if my partner it does something that disappoints me or is hurtful, I could yell at them. I could call them names. I could pour myself a drink. I could binge and purge. Um, if I think about what's most important to me, might be like um, mending the relationship. If this is, I always check in. Is this a relationship I want to keep, or is though I might feel in conflict with this person, do I also want to do something detrimental to my own health and well-being? Even if they hurt my feelings, do I have to continue like hurting myself? And so I might say, I want to keep the relationship, and from my values, I'm not going to let the fact that they hurt me control or change how I show up as my adult self in that relationship. So instead of maybe yelling at them or calling them names or pouring myself a drink and getting intoxicated, I might say, um, what you said to me just now was hurtful, and um, when you're ready and we can talk calmly, let's get come back together and discuss this. It takes a lot. You have to really ground yourself in that moment so that we don't move towards something reactive. Mm, see if I can catch that, yeah, in the chat. Maybe Shivani can read it for me.
Oh no, it was just a thank you. That was an excellent example.
Okay, great. Glad it was helpful. Real life, y'all. So think of one value that matters to you in your recovery. And I want you to hold that in mind for just a moment. And how might that value guide you in your next decision? Here from this like really calm state where we've been doing these grounding exercises, it's a lot easier to access like what our values are. I'll say in my work as a therapist over and over again, I notice people's anxiety increases greatly when they are feeling forced e- out to act outside of their own values. Um, Having to tolerate feeling in compromise with our values is extremely difficult. So that even perpetuates relapse. So, like, really anchoring to those values can be so helpful, grounding us in our recovery work. And so, the last one I want to share with you guys is called opposite action. And there's a tool from DBT therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, and it's called opposite action. And this means doing the opposite of the urge when the urge is harmful. So, like, for example, if you feel the impulse to isolate, that opposite action might be reaching out to a friend. If you feel the urge to binge, the opposite action might be to do a grounding exercise or go for a walk. Um, the key here is when your emotion is driving an action that doesn't serve you, we're going to experiment with what the opposite might look like. So when I work with a lot of adults, some of them have children and they like have the urge to yell at their kids. And I'm like, okay, so what if they're feeling like you have to get real big like a lion? What if you started whispering to your kids? And oftentimes you'll see teachers do that. They'll start talking really quietly in the classroom to get their students' attention when they're being really loud. You'd be surprised how effective that opposite action can be. So if you can think about what opposite action you could imagine taking the next time an urge shows up, feel free to share it in the chat.
Doing a little backslide here with the core values. Someone did say that empathy is trying to understand what a person is experience could help them.
Mhm. I love that. Try like an opposite action is definitely like maybe um shifting perspective. I'm gonna actively look to try to take the other person's perspective instead of focusing on my own. Um And that can also that's a great step toward like mending relationship rupture. We always think that our relationships are really strong, um, as how infrequently we have a rupture or conflict, but the strength of relationships is actually shown in the repair. Yeah, if you get really good at rupture repair by taking their perspective, you can definitely make your relationship much stronger. Good call. So no, remember, none of these skills have to be perfect. You're just simply tools to expand the space between that impulse and the intention. So you can choose like in alignment with your values, not just your urges. You don't have to do these skills perfectly. Give it a shot. Anything is you can often just create enough space then that you need to be able to move back to the prefrontal cortex. So if you guys are comfortable, let's make it personal. Identify your top triggers and your body cues. We'll maybe list 3 grounding tools. And write one value statement. And that might be like, for example, if I feel triggered to binge, I'll pause and drink water. Now I want to give you guys some great like somatic grounding skills. One is like if you start to feel triggered, actively like shaking out your hands and legs. And sometimes we're like get the willies out, right? Are really going to try to change that state that our body is kind of locked up in. Another one is when you press your feet, your flat feet, press them into the ground and feel that solid ground right underneath your feet. One here is like a self hug or hug a pillow. And I love like a butterfly hug. This can help us feel grounded in the moment, even tapping both of our shoulders. Or really giving yourself a good tight squeeze. Maybe even talking to yourself right then like someone you love. And also going for like a walk or gentle stretching. There's nothing I love more than going for an all walk. If you've not been on an all walk before, there's no agenda. You just go out in nature. There's no number of steps we're going to take. Often, I don't know about you guys, when you think about going for a walk, we're like 30 minutes. I need to get in this much movement. And I also need to listen to this podcast. We have like this whole exhaustive agenda. An all walk is not like that. You're just going out with the intention of noticing beautiful things in nature. The last time I did that, I watched this bee collect pollen from the stamen of a flower and pollinate another flower next to it. And I'd never seen that live in action. It was just absolutely incredible. I think somebody shared something in the chat.
Similar to what you're talking about, someone said that they will attend a meeting if they want to overeat or they're not following their meal plan. Helping walking does help them as well as watching some theater programs.
Excellent. Now I want to talk to you guys a little bit about window of tolerance. Um, our best decision making, we're talking about the optimal decision making zone that happens inside of our window of tolerance. That's the zone where we feel safe enough to still be present. You feel very much yourself. You feel like you have a lot of clarity. You're able to be curious. You can feel compassion for others. We can think abstractly. Outside of that window of tolerance, you're either going to be in hyper arousal, so that's over on the top. You're going to feel panic, rage, or urgency, and impulsivity, right? And on the low side is hypoarousal, so you might feel numb or disconnected. A lot of you might be familiar with the term dissociation. That's where you see that as in dissociation there in hypoarousal. The work is learning strategies to bring ourselves back to this window of tolerance. And working with some of these exercises, you can to tone your vagus nerve activation can help you expand your window of tolerance a little bit. You're so welcome, Kiara. Okay. So let's apply this a little bit. If, and here's a scenario. So you feel the urge to binge after a conflict. If you have a fight with a loved one or a friend or one of your teenage children, um, you might like step into the kitchen and look in the pantry and just grab like a box of crackers or snacks and feel that urge to just sit and eat them. Or you might crave alcohol after feeling rejected. If you were at work and um, a coworker got a promotion that you'd felt you had really anticipated getting, felt like you'd really earned, and would have felt like rejected by your supervisor, you might feel the compulsion to come home and have an alcoholic drink. So write down a few notes about how that urge comes up, and is that numbing or escaping? And after you've thought about that urge, practice one of these skills that we've talked about. You can practice the pause, regulate, do a values check, and choose an alternative action you could choose to take to meet the need for relief instead. Okay. And so now I do hope you have some, if you hadn't already, grab some paper or make some notes on your laptop or something. We're going to make this personal. And I want you to identify your top trigger and how you sense it in your body. Like for me, when someone swerves near me while I'm driving, I feel a zing travel from like my head down to my neck, all the way down my arms into my fingertips. And then list 3 grounding tools that you think might be helpful when you feel the same like physical sensation with that negative thought or trauma trigger. I'm going to go back to like my example I used a few minutes ago. We're going to write a values-based statement. So for example, when I feel triggered to binge, I will pause, get a glass of ice water, and then I'll text my accountability partner or my recovery coach, trusted friend. And if you'd like, share your statement in the chat. Remember, everyone's plan is going to look different. Yeah, someone says, I do feel the feeling, but I'm getting better at feeling if I must eat, that it's something healthy. And violence, being mean to a child or animal, indifference to hurting a child, those are triggers. Thank you for sharing that. If anyone feels comfortable sharing their their personal trauma informed value statement action plan. Here's another example here. I wrote out one for you. When I feel the urge to use or drink a substance, I'll take a grounding walk and remind myself of my value of health. Did we have someone share?
Yeah, I feel so someone mentioned another trigger when I feel triggered on a Zoom meeting, even if it's a different 12-step meeting, or I'll watch a presentation like a Grapevine podcast.
Really good. I love that. Helps us focus on something else in that hot moment till we can maybe come back and make a decision from our core self, the prefrontal cortex, when we're not in that hot moment and instead from a cool calm. I like it. Great. So I think we're going to talk about community and connection. What we know is recovery thrives in safe relationships, and peer support reduces shame and isolation. If we feel like we're not in this alone, or that, we're not like some kind of mutant or weird, like we're the only people who've experienced this, or no one can understand what it's like for us. Um, that usually decreases shame and isolation, and helps like lasting, sustained recovery. Even when we're feeling kind of weak in our recovery work, um, knowing other people who have been there and can be a great encouragement can be so helpful. So if you don't have a support group yet, you consider finding one that's trauma informed specifically, and it makes all the difference. If you found a support group, especially virtual, that's been helpful to you, feel free to share it in the chat. And on your notes from today, make a short list, 2 to 3 people or connections or groups that are supportive to you that you can turn to here in like these hot moments to help you move back to a cool calm. I really love a trauma informed group, not one that's shame based. We really want to stay away from shame if we can. That's definitely an activating trigger. I think we had someone share in the chat.
Yes, so it's their value statement. I will also try to understand that I've also been a person who hurt others when I drank a lot.
Mhm.
I try to know that if I didn't have the gift of recovery and counseling, I would just have an attitude of gratitude.
Yes, I love that. Moving away from shame and toward gratitude can be so empowering, right? Excellent. Okay. Well, I want to share some resources with you all for like continued healing. Obviously, NADA is an excellent resource. They have keep a real active and up to date information on their website. SAMS is another good resource, especially they have a lot of local chapters with support groups. If you check out their website, and the Trauma Research Foundation. And books I recommend often to my clients, that can be so helpful in understanding this mind and body connection. The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz, and any DBT skills workbooks. These are really great companions to recovery work. And kind of want to do a closing reflection with you all. Our key takeaway: safety and regulation first, and then intention. So before you act, take a pause. And as we close, I invite you to share one skill you're leaving with here today. And I love this quote: trauma is not your fault, but your healing is your responsibility, and it's your right. And you don't have to give your future to someone who hurt you. They already took something from the past. Okay, someone share.
The stop approach.
Mhm.
There are many things that I learned, but taking a walk without an agenda is one that I'm going to start using. You don't have to have a step goal.
Yes, excellent.
If you have your hand raised, please feel free to use the chat feature. I like the idea of reminding myself of my values. I know we have 4 minutes, Pamela, but I'm going to jump into Q&A. Um, there is a fellow professional in the chat, and they had a couple of questions for you. So when you were diving into like the core values and the opposite action slide, someone said that working with patients recovering from anorexia, there's often a fear of more anxiety acting, not like the value self-care. So can you address what can be a vicious cycle?
Yes. Is this written down somewhere? That was kind of a long question.
Yes, yes. It came in about 6:38.
Okay. Let me go back and read it.
And then there's a follow-up at 6:41.
Self-care. Um, More anxiety acting, not the value self-care. I want to answer this, but I'm not sure I understand the question really clearly. Yes, I can kind of address what I think is being asked here. Um, Giving up what has become the most trusted um, coping skill, so restriction or binging and purging or binge drinking, you're asking your client or patient to give up their most reliable skill. And so giving that up causes an intense increase in anxiety. We really don't want to ask them to give up their coping skills without giving them some new ones to swap in there. Really difficult with anorexia in particular because the fear of food um, is this ambivalence of I have to eat to stay alive. So food is like life sustaining, but they also feel deathly afraid of eating food. Like food represents the greatest risk to them. So you have this ambivalence, mixed feelings about that one same item, kind of like living in terror. Looks like Sarah shared a great one. Oh, okay. So somebody asked if this is approved for CPEUS. Oh, okay. I don't have this presentation approved for RDNs, but I'm sorry. Yeah. I've come and we had someone share, I've come far. I still have a way to go. Um, Now I have a buddy who I believe because I trust them that they're truthful. Okay, great. All right. Want to, okay. We had another question. Address the vicious cycle, want to act aligned with values, but afraid to eat. Yes. So what you see is like really getting stuck in the process of the ambivalence and fearing anytime that client or a patient experiencing anorexia is restriction has been their go-to when they feel the increase of distress they may double down and see an increase in restriction or those tried and true um, now harmful at coping skills so and remember there has to be so much compassion about this you're asking someone to lean into in that moment the very thing that they're afraid of terrified of in fact takes a lot of courage.
So we'll take one more question because we're right at 7. So can you describe the difference between drugs, alcohol, and binge eating? Binge eating is a coping skill that cannot be given up before learning new coping skills. Um, However, drugs and alcohol should be given up before learning new skills.
The difference, okay, well, one in particular I think is really important. Somebody giving up alcohol specifically should not be doing that at home, right? If you're needing to detox it, you can die from alcohol withdrawal at home. So, seeking medical support in a detox facility would be really important there. And in those facilities, they actually do at the same time simultaneously teach these kind of grounding and coping skills. As far as like binge eating as a coping skill, we're definitely going to be working with like name it to tame it. Like I feel this urge to binge. Where is this coming from? um, Labeling like the triggering event. What do they actually need in that moment? You can teach these skills kind of right as you're asking people to give up these negative coping skills, um, and expect them to kind of to relapse. A lot of times, they're not always going to be grounded with support in more triggering moments in the future. Okay.
Thanks so much, Pamela. I think we'll wrap it up there, but appreciate all the amazing knowledge and skills that you've helped us. If you all have any remaining questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to us at info@nationaleatingdisorders.org. I shared some links in the chat for donations and also to provide a quick survey. We will also be sharing a recording within the next couple of days, but thank you again, Pamela. It was so lovely having you present, and thank you so much for our audience for engaging. Hope you all have a great evening.